right, so I'm going to do a quick little walkthrough on exercise 5 of the chemistry lab because I know that some students in previous semesters have kind of struggled with the math part, so I'm going to try to go quickly, but hopefully this will help some of you that might be a little confused on it. So I'm going to start here at the beginning at recording personal information. So I'm going to put in all my information, but keep in mind, of course, that this is going to be related to you, obviously. So your own personal information, going to this website, calculating your calories, and we'll walk through it all, but it will all be based on your numbers. I just want to show you kind of a walkthrough. So for my personal information, I'm about, last I heard, 5'6.5". So we're just going to do 5'6". My weight in pounds is about 120. My age, I'm currently 39, female, and my activity level is inactive. So after I fill this out, I go here, which I already did, so I'm going to put in that information here. So you'll click on here and you'll enter in this information here, and then it's going to tell you in a couple of screens what your daily calories should be. So your recommended daily calories to maintain your weight. So I got this number, 1,550 calories. Now, if you wanted to gain weight, then you would want to add somewhere around 500 to 800 to that. If you wanted to lose weight, you could subtract about 500. So not more than that 500, because then it starts to get into a deficit and other issues become a problem, depending on the amount of weight that you have to lose. But at any rate, if you wanted to gain or lose, then you would want to take this number and then either add or subtract that 500 and then put that here. I'm not in that position, so I'm just going to go with the 1,550 calories. If you do that, then you want to make sure that you use your adjusted calories. So if you do put that number here, and that's what you're going to want to use moving forward throughout the rest of the activity. So I'm going here to our carbohydrates now. So here it says to multiply your recommended daily calorie intake by 45 and 65%. So I'm not going to read through this whole thing, but I am going to walk you through a little bit here. So we're taking our recommended daily calories, which remember for me was 1,550, and then multiply that by 0.45, right? Because it's 45% to 65% of your daily calories should be in the form of carbohydrates. So when I do that, I get 697.5, and you can go to the tens place there. Then the maximum calories would be then the same thing, the 550, but times my 65%, or 0.65. When I do that, I get 1,007.5. So then what we really want to know, though, is not when we go around every day and we eat foods and things like that, on the packaging, it doesn't tell us how many calories are carbohydrates. It tells us in grams. So now we need to calculate how many grams that actually means. So when you're out there in the world, you can kind of judge based on the packaging you see. So calories are 4 calories per gram for carbohydrates, and that's going to be different moving forward for other nutrients. But for carbohydrates, it's 4. So you're going to take your calories from carbohydrates, which this one is the minimum, first. So I'm going to take that 0.5 divided by 4. So when I do that, I get 174.4 grams. Then I do that same thing with my maximum. So I take my maximum up here, which was the 1,007.5, and then divide that by 4. When I do that, I get 251.88 or 0.9. All right, so that is going to tell me then my minimum calories that I should be taking in each day for carbohydrates and my maximum calories, or I'm sorry, grams, that I should be taking in carbohydrates. Sorry, grams. So then in this last part for carbohydrates, it says to record this range in grams, so the grams right here, in the chart at the end of the section. So I'm going to scroll down there so you can see which chart I'm talking about. So I'm going to move past the fats and saturated fats, cholesterol, protein, down here. This area here is where you're going to be recording, and I remind you, in grams down here at the bottom. The only thing that's not going to be in grams, of course, is the calories. So you can just kind of bring the calories piece down. That's my 1,550 for the day. And then I'm going to put my carbohydrate range that I just got, which was the 174.4, because this is in grams, to 251.9 grams. All right, so then I would go back up, and we just finished our carbohydrates. So now we're going to move into calculating fiber. So here it tells you, again, it walks you through your recommended daily calories. So again, that's my 1550. And then I'm going to divide that by 1,000 calories. So if I divide that by 1,000, I get 1.55. And then if I multiply that by 14 grams, I get 21.7 grams. Then you're going to go to the table and record that in grams in that chart or that table at the end again. I'm not going to keep scrolling us back and forth, but I'll fill it in when we get there. So then total fat is the next one. So we're doing something very similar. So our recommended daily calories. So we're always starting with that recommended daily calories, which for me was the 1550. For you, it may be whatever was calculated, but you could have then adjusted it. So if it's the adjusted, make sure you're using the adjusted so you know what you're aiming for. So in this case, again, multiply by 0.2 because our low end, our minimum total fat we want for the day is 20%. So we're taking our calories and we're going to multiply that by the 20% to get our minimum in calories, which I just did, 1550 times 0.2. And then our maximum, so again, the 1550 times 0.35 because 35% is our maximum that we want from fat. Now again, this is giving us calories. We don't really use calories in this sense out in the world. So we're going to take our calories and divide it by the number of calories per gram of fat. So it's actually 9 calories for each gram of fat. That's why fat is so high in energy. When I do that, I get 34.4 grams. So I took my minimum divided by 9. Now I take my maximum, 0.5, and divide that by 9. When I do that, I get 60.2. So again, record this range in the table, and again, you're recording it in grams. Make sure you're putting the gram amounts there. Okay, so minimum to maximum grams. Then for saturated fat, I think you're getting the idea by now. So my recommended daily calories times 10%, 155 calories. Then down here, 155 divided by 9, because again, that 9 calories per gram for fat, and I get 17.2. Now, in this one, notice for saturated fat, this is a maximum. So here the USDA recommends that less than 10%. So this would be my max number. I don't want to go over 17.2 grams of saturated fat in a day. So again, record that in the chart at the end, and that's going to be a maximum rather than a range. Then cholesterol, for everybody, no matter what, you don't want to have more. The USDA recommends that you don't have more than 300 milligrams of cholesterol per day. Notice that this is milligrams and not grams. So what you're going to do is you're just going to record this value in the chart. So that's a blanket one for everybody. So if we move to protein, again, my 1550 times the 10%. So I think you kind of got this by now. So I'm just going to write the numbers down. That's my minimum, my 1550 times 35%, because we want 10 to 35% to come from protein. So that gives me 542.5. But then again, remember we want to convert that to grams. Protein is 4 calories per gram. So again, we take our minimum here in calories divided by 4. That's going to get me 38.75 or 38.8. And then my maximum, 542.5 divided by 4, 135.6 grams. Okay, so again, record this in grams at the chart, which happens to be right here. So I'm going to fill in my chart with my numbers that I calculated. 17.2 grams. Remember, this is a maximum, so there's no range. This was the same for everybody, milligrams maximum. And then protein is my 38.8 to 135.6 grams. And then note over here that fiber is a minimum. So you want more, if you can, of fiber, but you want less of these two things. So we'll look at that in just a minute as well. Okay, so now you have that all in one place, all in one page. Now what you're going to do is you're going to analyze one of your meals. So you're going to pick a meal you had today or last night or whenever it is you happen to be doing this. but make sure that it actually is a meal that you ate, okay? Something that you actually ate, and then you look back and you kind of take a look at it. You can use food labels that maybe you have on hand for that, or restaurant menus. If it was just a restaurant, that's pretty easy. You can kind of look those up online even. Make sure that you include anything you ate, so entree, sides, any condiments that you had, ketchup, mustard, otherwise, butter, things like that, any drink that you had with it, and then if you had a dessert, make sure that you add on the dessert, so it's an entire meal. So then you're going to fill in the nutritional information here for each item that you selected on the page. So we're going to skip down to the page, and I'm going to fill in my lunch today. So when I fill in my lunch, I had some brown rice that I steamed. So I looked up, I actually use an app called Chronometer. It's widely used in the nutrition world because it's very, very accurate. People have been working on it for years and years and years. So in order to use that, what I'm mentioning that for is if you don't have labels. So for example, I didn't eat anything that was prepackaged or anything. So I had food that I made at home rather than having nutritional labels and things that I can look up online. So I use this and I put in what I ate for lunch into this app that I have. This one in particular, it's free, but you have to actually register or sign up. So, but there are lots of different apps like that out there. I just was sharing what I used in case you're in the same situation. So brown rice that I steamed, and I had about 1 cup of that. So when I did that, I had 240 calories. Now, you don't have to write the calories. I just wanted to note that this is calories, and then as you go along that you're noting that it's grams. 3.2 grams, 2 grams, 0.5 grams. So you're not looking at calories, 0 milligrams, and then 5.5 grams of protein. So again, you don't have to write the grams. I just wanted to make that very clear right now. Then what I did was I used a can of lima beans that I drained and rinsed. So I'm going to put that in here. I had, that was about a cup. I measured out of there. 0.2, 0.7. I did, even though I used a can for this, I still used the chronometer, so it was kind of the same parameters. Then what I did was I added some extra virgin olive oil, just like that, olive oil. And that was about 2 teaspoons that I added. I kind of guesstimated and do that based on just my spoon that I'm using to eat the food. So it was about 2 teaspoons. Sorry. I'm to write and talk. And then with that, I had some Earl Grey tea and some water. So these are all zeros across the board. I didn't add anything to the tea or to the water. So I did put them into the chronometer just to see if anything come up. Plus with the chronometer, it's kind of neat because you can see the minerals and vitamins and things. But at any rate, that doesn't count for what we're doing here. So then what I'm going to do, next step, and actually if you look up here, it says this next step. So then step 3 is add the columns to get the total nutrition information for your meal. So that is down here. So you're going to add up each of these columns. So I'm just adding all the way down. And then I get my calories that I had for my meal, my carbohydrates, my grams of fiber, my fat grams, my saturated fat grams, cholesterol, and protein. Okay, so then the next step here. This is where it kind of gets a little bit confusing for people. So calculate the percentage of your daily calories contained in your meal. So what you're doing then is you're taking the calories in your meal, which what I just wrote down here. My meal was 544 total calories. That's what I just calculated as my total. Then divide that by your recommended daily calories. So remember, my recommended daily calories were the 1550. Okay. So then what you're going to do is multiply that by 100. It's not really 100%, and you'll see that in a minute. So if I do the 544 divided by my 1550, then I get 0.35, and that's actually going to be 35%. So that's times 100 will get me the 35%. So you can see here, this is 35%, meaning that the calories in my meal divided by my total gives me a percentage, right? So my meal is that 35% of what I need to eat in this whole day today. So now that we know that that's 35%, we're going to multiply the percentage you calculated in step 4. So that was my 35%. By my personal daily recommended value for each nutrient. So I'm going to do that down here and show you what that means. So this right here, personal daily recommendations, this is literally just copying the chart that we had up on the previous page. So I'll just go up here, this chart right here. So this is just making sure that you have this chart available all on the same page so it's easier to do your math. So you're literally going to just take these numbers and move them down there. So I'm going to do that and then be right back. All right, so I just wrote all of those down. Again, I just copied them. And notice I wrote in here minimum, maximum, maximum. You don't have to do that, but I just want to make it clear again as we're moving forward with the calculations and things that those are minimums, maximums, and maximums. So I just copied my chart. Now what we're doing, recall that my meal, my calories right here were 35% of my total calories for the day. So 0.35, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to multiply each one of these nutrients by 0.35 in my case to get how much of each nutrient should have been comprised of in my meal. How much of each of these nutrients I should have eaten to get 35% of my daily intake. So here, this is just going to be the calories I ate because that's my 35%, which of course is the same here, 35% of the 1550. So if I multiply this 174 here, so 174.4 times my 0.35, then I'm going to get about 61 grams. Then I do the same thing with my maximum carbohydrates. So that was my minimum carbohydrates, then my maximum times 0.35, and I get 88.2, okay? So then next, I'm going to take my fiber here, the 21.7 grams, multiply it by the 0.35, and that's going to give me my 7.6 grams minimum I should have eaten in this meal of fiber. I move on, same thing, total fat, multiply by minimum and my maximum by the 0.35. Saturated fat, multiply that by 0.35. Again, that's a maximum. And then cholesterol by the 0.35. And then my protein by the 0.35. So that gives me what I should have eaten, minimum, maximum, and ranges for all of these different things. And I didn't write grams in there for each of them because I have the units in the table itself, so you don't have to gum up the space with that. All right, so then what we want to do is we want to look at what we actually ate versus what we should have eaten, given these parameters. So, does the meal meet the recommendations? So, yes or no is all you need to write in these, and then you're going to kind of analyze that in the next questions. So what I need to do then is I need to look. This is just a pass, that's what it is. So I want to see if my carbohydrates, what I should have eaten in my one meal, is between 61 grams and 88.2 grams. If I look up at my carbs, remember this is my total for my meal, I'm at 91, and look, I did not meet that. So that's a no. I ate too many carbs for the meal. I went over that 88.2. So then next, I look at my fiber. I want to get a minimum of 7.6 grams in this one meal. If I look up here, did I meet a minimum? Did I eat more than 7.6 or at 7.6? And I did, so I met that, yes. So then on and on. So if we look at our total fat, is it between 12 and 21? It's not. It's pretty darn close, just about 12 here, but we'll say no because it's not over 12 or 12 or over. Saturated fat, again, this one you have to look at it, and remember this is a maximum. So you're not wanting to get to the 6.2 in my case, but you want to be under the 6.2. And at 1.9, I am under the 6.2, so yes. Same thing with the cholesterol. That's a maximum. Are you under that maximum number for cholesterol? Yes, I am. And then for protein, you want to be between the two. Am I between the two? Yes, I am. Okay, so that's all of the math, which I think can get a little bit difficult for some students. So hopefully I made that very clear for you and moved through it quick enough but not too quick. And then what you want to do is you want to move on to analyzing your meal. So consider the percent of your daily calories contained in this meal. Are there enough calories to make it a healthy meal? Do you have enough calories left over for other meals? So in this meal, at 35%, I do have more. I have enough space for 2 more meals, probably a couple snacks, depending on how big my meals are. And actually, this meal was pretty big. It was a very filling meal, so it's going to last a while. So my other meals might be smaller. So I would write all of that information down here. So do you have enough calories? Yes. Was it enough calories to make it a healthy meal? So was it a good amount of calories for the day? Yes. And then explain, why do I think that? And kind of going what I just said, I've got plenty of meals, it was filling, etc. How healthy is the meal you chose? Now, this is an important one. This is where you want to actually look at your numbers. That's why I'm making this smaller so we can actually see my numbers up here. So how healthy is it? I'd say it's pretty healthy. I met most of my recommendations here, all of these yeses. Which nutrients need to be increased or reduced to make the meal healthier? So I would say I need to decrease my carbohydrates slightly, right? Because I was at 88.2, which is slightly less than the 91 grams. So this is my explain part. And then here, my fats are just a little under my minimum, not too much. So I would maybe mention that they're a little bit under, but not too bad. I can just have another drop of olive oil in there if I wanted to, and that would get me up to the 12. But if I rounded it, it would have been 12. So I would explain that. Then examine the food labels or restaurant menu again. So if you did choose a restaurant menu, then you would use that information, or maybe if you're talking about labels, maybe you could look at some different options for different foods and asking what specific changes you would make to make your meal healthier or change it in the way you needed to. So healthier meaning getting closer to meeting those recommendations, and then give specific examples and explain why you would change those items. So for my example, I would say my carbohydrates were a little bit over, so I would want to decrease those. Again, it was a pretty big meal, so this is all part of my explanation. It was a pretty big meal. I probably could have just backed off on a little bit of the rice there. Or what I often do is, rather than making a big pot of rice in my rice cooker that I keep in my refrigerator for a couple days, what I often do is I'll mix it with quinoa and do that, which I'll probably do moving forward looking at this information. So I mix it with quinoa, and quinoa is lower in carbohydrates. It's actually a little bit higher in fiber and a little bit higher in protein too. So more fiber is always better. The more fiber you can get, the better. And I've got some leeway in my protein there, plenty of leeway, so I could get a little bit more protein. So I probably would switch out maybe even half of my rice for quinoa. That would bring my carbohydrates down, and then it would increase my fiber and increase my protein, and those will be fine. As far as the fat is concerned, to make that healthier, again, I would write that it's pretty close. As I said, it's pretty close. Maybe I'd put another drop of olive oil. Maybe I would use more of the lima beans. There was a little bit, of course, it'd take like another half a cup or something, but I could probably just add a little bit more of the olive oil to make it a little bit saucier than I did. And then that would meet my needs for the fat. But, being slightly under fat is probably okay, depending on the other meals I eat today. So so that's what I would say. I would exchange those things out. I would probably switch out quinoa for some rice, etc. Otherwise, looking pretty good. But make sure that when you put your information in, let's say you decided to use a meal that you went out and got something from a restaurant, for example. Those tend to be really, really high in these nutrients and in the less than desirable nutrients, and low in the other ones that are desirable. So it is kind of interesting and fun, I think, to look at the menu and see what you could have switched out, and then you can use that knowledge going forward. So just make sure you write that all out and do your explanation in the lab. So if you have any other questions about how to complete this, please do either write in the discussion board, because other students might have that same question, or you can always email me too.